All right, we start this hour without Patrick Henry, but with Donald Trump. Audio emerging of President Trump allegedly discussing highly confidential documents detailing a blueprint for a possible attack on Iran.
The tape is now being used as evidence in the special counsel's indictment over Trump's handling of classified information.
Gillian Turner joins us live from the White House with more. Good morning to you, Gillian.
Good morning to you guys. So the federal criminal indictment against Trump references, as you just mentioned, this specific audio. It's from back in July 2021, taken at Bedminster in New Jersey. The indictment says that in this tape, what you hear is the former president showing classified information to a writer and a publisher about the government's plans to attack Iran. The clip that was leaked last night runs about 2 minutes. Take a listen to this clip.
I just found, isn't that amazing? This totally wins my case, you know. Except it is like highly confidential, secret. This is secret information. But look at this. Yeah. See, as president, I could have declassified it. Now I can't.
Now, 8 days ago on this very network with our colleague Bret Baier, the former president insisted that when he was having this conversation, he had no classified documents in his possession. He said what he was holding and referencing were news articles. Take a listen.
I said I couldn't do it, but that wasn't a document, Brett. There was no document. That was a massive amount of papers and everything else talking about Iran and other things. And it may have been held up or may not, but that was not a document. I didn't have a document per se. There was nothing to declassify. These were newspaper stories, magazine stories.
Trump responded last night to the audio by calling the special prosecutor, Jack Smith, deranged and accusing him of leaking this tape himself. Trump has already pleaded not guilty to 37 counts related to mishandling the nation's top secrets that he kept stashed at Mar-a-Lago. Now, this audio is one of two in which prosecutors allege the former president mishandled the nation's secrets and compromised national security by illegally keeping classified information on his person and then sharing it in turn with people that don't have security clearances. We have not heard from the White House since this news broke last night. There is a briefing coming up this afternoon. You better be sure we will ask about it. Back to you guys.
Well, they're in a tough situation, Gillian, because Robert Hur is also investigating Joe Biden. So that would bring up questions about how's Joe Biden's investigations. How many leaks have come out from Robert Hur's office about Joe Biden's documents? Do you know?
Do I know?
Zero.
I'd have to look into that and get back to you, Brian.
Right, exactly.
I haven't seen
I don't think any of them have.
I don't think so either.
Yeah, I don't think so.
It's amazing. Tight ship.
Thank you very much. Well, you know, regarding the leaking of this particular tape, when you look at what Gillian just said, where she said Trump posted on Truth Social, the deranged special prosecutor Jack Smith, working in conjunction with the DOJ and FBI, illegally leaked and spun a tape and transcript of me, which is actually an exoneration. So you know what? If Trump thinks it's an exoneration of him, perhaps somebody on his side
actually
did the leaking to CNN and Maggie Haberman.
Well, we'll see. I mean, he's going to say in court, he's going to say, well, Trump says on tape, see, as president, I could have declassified it. Now I can't, you know, but this is still a secret. He's saying on that tape.
Yeah. He's admitting he's got classified documents.
It sounds like the same tape because it's the same issue, and what was there was a story that Millie, after the president lost the election, was telling confidants, hey, I'm worried that Donald Trump's going to start a war with Iran. And Trump reads this and goes, wait a second, you're the one who wanted to start a war with Iran. I never started a war with Iran. And that, hence this conversation, that's as much context as you can get. But keep in mind, too, kind of surprised and was kind of effective when he told Bret Baier, hey, Bret, these were newspaper articles. There were no top secret documents. So he has a pushback on that. And the other thing is, clearly Mark Meadows has flipped. He has disappeared as chief of staff. He knows everything. And he seems to be in control of these tapes, you would think, or his biographer does in a book that nobody read. So we'll see what Mark Meadows has biographer in there.
That's why, yeah, that was the writer, right?
Yeah.
Someone writing a book about him.
So he's the one leaking it, or
you can hear the publisher, you can hear the writer discussing the memoir.
They're writing a book about Meadows.
Right, his memoir. Trump's lawyers actually knew about this tape since March when one of Trump's aides, a woman by the name of Margot Martin, was asked about it during an appearance before the grand jury, and then the government subpoenaed her copy of the tape. So the tapes are floating around on the Trump side. We don't know, exactly where it came from. But Kayleigh McEnany was on with Hannity last night and made it very clear, this stuff is secret, and there are certain ways you're supposed to handle it if true. Watch this.
We have to look at and respect classification. It's important for national security. It's important for the people who gather and collect that information and sometimes put their lives on the line doing so, oftentimes, I should say. That being said, I agree this case would not have been brought against any other candidate. I have real questions about Joe Biden, not just taking classified information when he had no declassification authority, but taking them during a time as senator when he had no right to take them. We also have to think how this will be litigated on a national stage in a national election. And President Trump, one thing he can do here is he can say routinely on the campaign trail, we're talking about me, but we should be talking about you, the American people. We should be talking about the economy. We should be talking about inflation, the horrors of the Joe Biden presidency.
That is such great advice. I hope the president takes it to quickly pivot. And anytime a reporter asks him from here on in, he's got a legitimate answer. Right now, the judge has asked us not to talk about this evidence in this case, so I'm going to abide by that. And even Brett said, I was surprised the president got into such details on the documents. I was prepared for him to punt on that question. I would like to bring something else up. I'm wondering if the timing is effective. The New York Times gets these documents, gives it to CNN at the same time that Hunter stuff hits turbo speed in terms of revelations and widespread interest. Now, of course, you don't script Russia, but that was fortuitous timing for the Hunter Biden investigation. But then here this comes, and I wonder, does anyone curious what Joe Biden managed to smuggle out of the skiff, I assume, over the last 20, 30 years that ended up at the University of Delaware, at one of his houses, one of his lawyers' places, or at Chinatown? I just don't understand how they could be both doing investigations and only one side is leaked out.
Well, and it does sound as if the other investigation into January 6th is heating up because there are reporting this morning that 5 or 6 Secret Service agents have testified to a grand jury about what happened with Donald Trump on January 6th.
It's Georgia.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
I'm Steve Ducey.
I'm Brian Kilmeade.
And I'm Ainsley Earhart. And click here to subscribe to the Fox News YouTube page to catch our hottest interviews and most compelling analysis.